Greenwood grocery had been a staple in the small town of Oakwood for generations. Its cheerful red sign and welcoming atmosphere made it a hub for locals to gather, share gossip, and stock up on essentials. But beneath fluorescent-lit aisles and neatly stacked shelves lay a secret, a dark presence that stirred when the store fell silent at night. Lane, a recent college graduate, had taken a part-time job at Greenwood Grocery to make ends meet while she searched for a job in her field. She had heard whispers among her coworkers, tales of strange occurrences after closing time, aisles rearranged and items inexplicably moved. But Lane dismissed them as the exaggerations of a bored staff until one fateful night. It was a quiet evening in Oakwood, the sky painted with hues of twilight as Lane completed her closing duties. The last customer had left, the bell over the door chiming softly in their wake. Lane wiped on the checkout counter, her thoughts drifting to her plans for the weekend and the stack of resumes waiting to be sent out. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, Lane finished her tasks and headed towards the back of the store to lock up. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting stark shadows that seemed to dance along the linoleum floor. The familiar hum of the refrigerators and the faint rustling of plastic bags filled the air, creating an illusion of normalcy. But as Lane reached for the back door, a chill wind swept through the store, a breeze that seemed to carry with it a faint, whispered murmur. She paused, her hand hovering over the door handle, her senses on high alert. Lane. The voice was soft, almost imperceptible, yet it sent a shiver down Lane's spine. She glanced around, her heart pounding in her chest, but the store lay silent and empty save for the familiar aisles and shelves. "Who's there?" Lane called out, her voice echoing through the stillness. No answer came, only the faint rustling of paper goods and the distant hum of a refrigeration unit. Lane hesitated, torn between curiosity and fear. She knew she should leave, lock up, and go home, but something compelled her to investigate further. With cautious step, Lane ventured into the aisles, a labyrinth of neatly stacked products and colorful displays. The shelves seemed taller and closer together in the dim light, casting deeper shadows that seemed to pulse and shift with each passing moment. "Lane." The voice whispered again, this time closer, its tone pleading and desperate. Lane's pulse quickened, her breath catching in her throat as she followed the sound deeper into the store. She passed the produce section, the frozen foods aisle, and finally arrived at the canned goods aisle, a narrow corridor lined with towering shelves. There, at the end of the aisle, stood a figure. A woman in a tattered dress, her hair matted and wild, her eyes wide with terror. She reached out toward Lane, her fingers trembling as if grasping for salvation. "Help me," the woman pleaded, her voice echoing through the aisle like a haunting refrain. Lane's mind raced, disbelief warring with fear as she stared at the apparition before her. The woman's form flickered like a ghostly flame, her features blurred and indistinct, yet her eyes held an unmistakable plea for help. Without thinking, Lane took a step forward, her hand outstretched toward the woman. But before she could touch her, the figure vanished into thin air, leaving only the echo of her plea lingering in the silence. Heart pounding, Lane stumbled backward, her mind reeling with the impossibility of what she had witnessed. She turned and fled from the aisle, her footsteps echoing on the linoleum floor as she raced toward the front of the store. Outside, the night air was cool and still, a stark contrast to the unsettling atmosphere within Greenwood Grocery. Lane leaned against the brick wall of the store, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she struggled to compose herself. "What happened?" a voice called out, startling Lane from her thought. She turned to see Greg, the night janitor, approaching with a concerned expression on his face. Lane opened her mouth to speak, to tell him about the woman in the aisle, but the words caught in her throat. How could she explain something that defied logic and reason? I don't know," Lane finally managed, her voice barely a whisper. Greg nodded understandingly, his gaze scanning the darkened storefront behind her. "Strange things happen in this place after hours," he said quietly. "I've heard stories, but I never thought—" Lane shivered, her arms wrapped around herself as she tried to shake off the lingering chill of fear. She glanced back at the quiet grocery store, its windows reflecting the moonlight like eyes watching from the shadows. As Greg led her towards the parking lot, Lane couldn't shake the feeling that Greenwood Grocery held secrets far darker than anyone could imagine. A place where the boundary between the living and the dead blurred in the flickering light of the aisles. And as she drove home, the echo of the woman's plea, "Help me," haunted her thoughts, a reminder of the darkness that lurked within the familiar walls of Greenwood Grocery.